Right. Well, good morning. Thanks for coming. And it's evening where you are, Ryan. Now, Ryan, you are, I think it's fair to say, I don't know really enough about your background, but I'd love to know where you've come from and what you want to talk to us about today.
Sure. Well, I think I kind of got tuned into some of the stuff that you do because I think you maybe did something fairly recently with Stanley Krippner.
Yeah, a
Does that sound right? Okay,
couple of
yeah.
years ago.
And well, I think I just kind of came across it, and Dr. Krippner's been actually giving me some help on on the book I'm writing. So I think that's kind of how two and two got put together. But my background is I'm in sales and marketing, but since I'm about 11 years old, I've also had this kind of weird habit of studying things that don't make sense or that shouldn't
Hmm,
make sense.
hmm.
And that kind of all started because when I was 11, I found out Santa Claus wasn't real.
That can
And
be traumatic. Yeah, sure.
I was thinking about this yesterday. I guess you would call that an ontological shock, right? Here's something that you thought was real, you were told is real, and then you find out, oh, wait a minute, actually, we've been lying to you. It's not real. And my upbringing was Catholic. I went to Catholic school, and kind of it just flipped a switch in my brain. It was like, well, wait a minute. There's other stories like that too that I'm told to believe.
Hmm.
And not only am I told to believe them, I'm told that terrible things will happen if I don't, despite the fact that they don't sound like reliable data. So that's kind of what started it for me. And then the next year I went to public school, um, and all of a sudden they're teaching different things. So they're teaching, no, it wasn't 6 days and a wave of the hand. It was, a billion years and this new thing called evolution. So, it's just a number of these things kind of happened close together.
Hmm.
And my makeup was already that I wasn't too hip to because I said so, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Why? Because it says so in this book. That's all the answer you need. That was never going to be enough for me.
So it's quite
So
interesting, yeah, like critical thinking, woken up at 11. That's quite early, isn't it?
well, I've talked to some people who, when they find out I thought Santa Claus was real till I was 11, they think that makes me some kind of late bloomer or something. But
Yeah, but
that
I don't have that feeling. I've got the feeling of like it's something I really believe, and then there's a shattering because it's like, wait a minute, these people, they wouldn't lie. I trust these people. I love these people. They wouldn't lie to me. Yeah. Would you lie to me, Mum? No. Would you lie to me, Dad? No. And then they lie to your faces. It's like, wow, it's like a an awakening of the ego in a way, or a
yeah,
killing of the ego, I think.
yeah. So it was like it probably didn't really register as all that at the time, because by the time you're 11, you've been hearing for several years from other people that Santa Claus isn't real.
Right.
But I really held on to it. I remember the year before that, I was like, I don't know, I don't think it's real. And kind of whatever, 10 days before Christmas, I was overcome with probably not dissimilar from a deathbed Catholic who hasn't been that devout,
Hmm.
for the last little while, gets kind of antsy. I don't know. Christmas was right around the corner, so I wrote him a letter. Don't worry, don't worry, big guy. I still believe. But that's just kind of what I see as the root of what went on to be, a pretty serious effort to discover and understand for really my whole life. And so particularly over the last few years, but my whole life, I've been trying to understand physics, particularly the things about physics that just don't seem to make it through a logical brain unscathed if materialism is true, right?
Hmm.
So, you know,
Well, that you puts it
I,
right in our area, doesn't it? Like remote viewing, psychic functioning,
yeah,
miracles, spontaneous healing.
I mean, I'm a trained remote viewer, although I would also admit most times I'm not amazing at it, but I have had training and uh, talked with, had discussions with a lot of the folks that are, kind of well known in the remote viewing world. In fact, so about a year ago, I started writing a book, and the book is called "It From Us." And what it really fundamentally is about is the proposal that I offer, which is that the universe fundamentally is not matter, it's not energy, it's not space time, and it's not consciousness. But fundamentally underlying our physical reality is what I call an informational substrate. And it was remote viewing that really led me to this because I had kind of another ontological shock. I'd been studying a lot of these topics. Remote viewing was kind of later, but ancient civilizations and physics and UAP and I'm trying to understand what it is about these things that they're so pervasive and yet should be so easily dismissed if the basis of reality is what it looks like, right? Physical things and forces to do with those things and energy related to things that happen to those things. So but then I was kind of going through a period. I had sold a business and I kind of didn't have anything to do and getting depressed. So I kind of dove into some of these topics, and it took me to some of the more fringe areas than where I usually go. So I'm reading, I read Penetration by Ingo Swann, and my training is sales and marketing. If you're any good at that, you're also pretty good at identifying people's motivations. So, for instance, if I'm talking to somebody, or if I'm even watching a podcast or whatever, and somebody is on there, talking about some of these topics,
Mm.
like in a way, like they know, right?
Mm.
Like a psychic is saying, oh, whatever your uncle is speaking to me or whatever.
Mm.
I mean that would be an excellent psychic, and I know psychics, and from what they've told me, it doesn't work that way. But I can see by the way the person behaves, the language that they use, whether or not um, they're behaving in a way that demonstrates an agenda, right?
Mm. Mm.
And I wasn't seeing those behaviors from people like Hal Puthoff and Paul Smith and Lynn Buchanan and so on. Some of these
Mm.
folks in the remote viewing world.
Mm.
I wasn't seeing it. I was seeing people very matter of factly, communicating things and oftentimes saying, "Well, we don't know." And well, we don't know you're not going to find that in the vocabulary of a charlatan.
Mm.
It's not how they communicate. So I'm reading Ingo Swann's book, and I'm getting curious. So then I read another book by Lynn Buchanan, and halfway through that, I kind of set the book down and I was like, listen, I don't know that I can keep going on like this without knowing if there's something to this or not. And I was a materialist. I was fascinated by UAP and I was fascinated by ancient civilizations and a lot of these other topics, but I didn't fundamentally think I was going to find magic involved, right? Or, I thought science just didn't have the answers to those yet, but someday would. And just, I guess, never really thought about whether or not it would be something other than a materialist paradigm that they fit into. But I put the book down. I went and got something out of a drawer. I put that thing in my pocket and I gave it a number. And I went and got my wife. I said, come in here, sit down, do exactly what I say and don't think.
I must try that one with my partner. We'll see if that ever works.
I've thought about that before. That could have gone a number of other ways. But, I slid a piece of paper and a pen in front of her. And I told her, just kind of outlined the basic protocol as I understood it at that point. I said, I'm going to give you a number. And she was nowhere near me. She had no idea what I was doing. She was outside drinking coffee when I decided to do this. And she was not there. There's no way that there's some other explanation to this. So I give her the number and she does the things I told her to do. And I said, okay, now describe the thing in my pocket. And she writes, round, small, smooth, green. And I said, anything else? She said, nope. I said, all right, now sketch your impression of the thing. Don't think. She draws a circle with 3 squiggly lines contained inside of it. I said, are you done? She said, yeah. I said, all right, put the pen down. I reached in my pocket and I pulled out, and it was a marble. It was a blue and green glass kid's marble. And I had actually wrapped it in a piece of wrinkled paper because I didn't want her to see what was in my pocket. Kind of through the fabric or whatever. But I mean, to say that result was unexpected and shook, who I am would maybe not even do it justice. I mean, prior to that, in my worldview, people of faith were idiots, right? Psychics were con artists, all that, right? And then there on a Saturday morning, on a whim, I decided to test that and found something quite other than what I expected. So that sent me really kind of headlong. I spent a few weeks after that almost unable to talk about anything else. We did a bunch of other remote viewing experiments that morning, and I mean they were not ambiguous, right? There was clear. It was clear that something, there's something factual here, but it just doesn't make sense if the way we're told to look at the world and understand reality is really accurate. And so that's where it began. And then, I learned to remote view, but not because I did a remote viewing session earlier today. It's not that much fun to me. I don't really get that big of a kick out of it. I can be an anxious guy. So I'm not like particularly, I'm not like the personality type that makes a great remote viewer. The reason that I learned it is because I wanted to understand. I wanted to know how it works. And my teacher, would probably make the comment that, something like, yes, we like Ryan. But what she's really thinking is, and we wish that he would be quiet during the classes because he's constantly trying to figure out how it works. And that was me. So one day I'm talking to ChatGPT, and I was doing some experiments. What I was trying to see is, could AI be a good evaluator of a session? Could it I did, pick targets and
yeah, it's a good question.
Could it be the tasker? And
it could be a
I
monitor.
didn't know.
I mean, it's
No.
a really good question. I was thinking at some point I should try it, but I'd love to hear what you did.
Well, real quick before I forget, there's actually there's a group of people who's doing this now. They have a website called Social RV. It's social-rv.com. And they're doing exactly this. They've got AI evaluating sessions. And I mean, it's if you're at all curious about remote viewing, I recommend it. You can go there and just, sign up for an account 30 seconds and do a session right now. It's pretty amazing. And they're gathering all kinds of data that's, helpful to people like me and other folks who are doing research on this. But oh, I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, so I'm doing the back and forth with Chat GPT. Hey,
Mm.
pick a target for me, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And then I asked it, hey, I'm going to pick a target for you. And it got two or three in a row that were really good. I mean, I would not better than a really good remote viewer's good session, but as good or maybe a little better than a uh, maybe like they call it whatever, beginner's luck,
Mm.
where if you haven't done it before, but somebody just has you do it. Usually that those first couple of sessions are halfway decent. It was like that. And so I just asked it. I said, hey, you have access to all the information in the world or whatever. How does remote viewing work? And it gives me, kind of some textbook stuff. Well, it could be a field, it could be a particle, it could be
Mm.
clear, you're seeing the future where you see the feedback. And the very unsatisfying answers. And I just I'm not even sure why I remembered it, but just kind of out of nowhere, I remembered I had seen an interview that Hal Puthoff did where they were talking about this very thing. What could be the mechanism? And he had made some kind of a comment, maybe information. Maybe there's an informational aspect to the universe that we don't understand, and something like that might explain how remote viewing works. So I asked the AI. I said, I've heard people say that it's possible that information is a fundamental, you know, to reality. If that's the case, how might remote viewing work then? And it came back and said, well, if information is a fundamental aspect, then it isn't viewing. It's a query. If information is the basis of physical reality or underlies physical reality, then it would be absolutely connected to everything that there is. I mean, literally everything would come from it. So, space and time wouldn't matter, you know, location and, you know, temporal position would all be completely irrelevant. But that's what started it. So, within a few months, I had looked at so many different things this way, like UAP, like consciousness in general, biology,
Mm.
and I couldn't find anything
Mm.
that this didn't answer better than the other explanations that I could find or have found. So I started putting it down in a book, and now the book's almost done, and starting to do some stuff like this and kind of
I
put the
know
word
how
out.
you
But
feel. I know how you feel. I mean, that's an interesting story. Um, I like I like your candor. Um, I don't think it matters what background we've got. It gives us a certain set of skills. Yeah, you don't need to have worked at SRI and so on to have a brain and to think, or to get. In fact, remote viewing is so much about you can go directly to the answer. You know what I mean? Um, and I wrote this
mhm,
book called The Tao's DNA, and I want to just tell you a little bit about it because the Chinese, the way I learned it, the Taoists said there's spirit, there's energy or qi, and then there's matter. And what's connecting them is the energy. And spirit is beyond our comprehension. It's they write it as a zero. They say like this is nothing. Yeah. but it's not an absence of something. It's beyond our comprehension, whereas nothing I can understand is I've got something or I don't have something. So it's beyond our comprehension. And then from that space, what I propose in my book, Tao's DNA, is plus one and minus one. And
Hmm.
at the same time, that still that zero exists. But there's plus one, so that's yang, and there's minus one, which is yin, not one and zero. And so you get almost like a qubit. Now that means things can be true and not true at the same time. So,
Right.
and this is the interesting thing because I wasn't thinking in terms of quantum physics. I really don't know anything about quantum physics. I know the double slit experiment, and there's a cat that died and didn't. That's sort of my knowledge of that. Um, but it was like, well, that's so interesting because it's a bit like this qubit in quantum computing. Yeah, the interesting thing of something can be true and not true at the same time. And we experience that with remote viewing. For anybody who wants to remote view Batman is going to be able to remote view Batman and indeed Father Christmas. Yeah, they will get a result. And people are going to say that, well, that's not true. Ah, it's true. It just may not be, how can I say, a fact, maybe?
Well, it's accurate,
Accurate,
but
there you
not
are. It's
but not
accurate, but not true.
factual.
Factual,
Yeah.
right. There you are. I like
Yeah.
that. Accurate. Yeah. So,
But that's interesting. That's interesting what you were talking about with is it Taoism? Is that how you say it?
yes, I mean, well, some people say Taoism, but the modern opinion says Tao. Yeah. And the thing is about Taoism, the idea is to return to that zero. So essentially returning to your nature, and that's at the center. So whenever you spin something, there's this how can you say, like a, a microcosm of the universe happening, because
Hmm.
at the center there's this, you know, undefinable axis uh, that everything's spinning around. And then, of course, you've got something going forward, something going backwards. So all the martial arts is about um, moving, spinning, circulating, and creating a wave, of course. And the same is for feng shui. Feng shui, if you've got somebody's house, yeah, the first thing you want to make sure is that nothing is um, stagnant. There has to be air moving. If it's moving too fast, that can be a problem because it's going to hit something which isn't moving, and there's going to be an explosion sort of thing. So you're trying to just get this harmonization the whole time. And even Confucius called something called Zhongyong, which is like our search for not reaching our highest or lowest, but keeping things in balance. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I wrote a book recently. It's called, I think it's called, I can't even remember the name. The Door to Inner Power. Yeah. Which is just saying, it's saying a lot. It's all about Chinese martial arts, but it's essentially um, that even the way you move your body is designed for you to want to keep balance. You just want to keep balance. So when I move forward, I have to move something backwards. Yeah. When I move upwards, I have to push something downwards. So I'm always looking for balance, and that is the I would say a central, my humble understanding. I'm not sure it's that humble some days, but um, that's the primary governing force in the universe. It wants to balance things. It just has to balance things. So if things go up too much, it's going to get crushed down, and things go down too much, it's going to be lifted up.
Oh yeah, that's fun to hear too because my framework, I call it an information first framework. You
Mm,
know, it's not matter first, it's information first.
mm,
And people will ask me sometimes, okay, well, then how, especially science people,
mm,
they'll say, okay, well, information can't exist without a difference, right? Which is technically true if you study like information theory and
Yeah, yeah.
Claude Shannon and stuff like that. Yeah.
We can't
But
understand something without not understanding it.
yeah, like my desk is a rectangle, but a rectangle, some other shape has to exist for a rectangle to be able to be isolated as a shape. So,
Correct.
fundamentally, information is about the relationships between things. And so I remember the first time it happened, a guy asked me, well, information requires a difference. So pre Big Bang, and of course the Big Bang, they kind of hypothesized must have been all the material in the universe already existed and was just really super condensed in this hot ball somewhere, um, which is kind of a fun little box to paint yourself into, or a fun little hot dense ball to paint yourself into.
Mm.
But he said, okay, so before there was anything,
Mm.
then there was nothing, right? I said, yes, there was nothing. And he said, okay, so what if nothing exists, then nothing can be different from anything else. And I'm out on a limb here. This is just my how I visualize it.
Mm.
I don't have any math to necessarily back this up, but I said, well, if there was nothing, but inherent in that lack of anything was the possibility that there could be something, that would be a difference. And in fact, that's how I visualize the universe coming into existence. There's no time uh, prior to the instantiation of the universe. So, the idea of, well, how long was there nothing? It's the first thing that comes to mind, but it's kind of silly. But there was nothing, but the possibility of something existed. And that is not dissimilar from what we see in quantum mechanics. They're looking for the particle. Where is it? Well, the real truth is that there is no particle, never was and never will be. But we can see, the behaviors that we expect to see out of a particle when we measure the wave. And so it's not dissimilar. You go from kind of the pre-reality substrate, which is strictly informational. It's the probability wave. And if called upon from that probability wave, it will produce a particle for you. And I kind of see the universe starting in a similar way, but it's not. It's always fascinating to me, but never weird, that so many faith traditions basically tell the same story that quantum mechanics tells. And they're all fundamentally information first ontologies. I mean, I'm from the United States, grew up Catholic. Okay. So we're in Revelation, or, Gospel of John. In the beginning, there was the Word. But that was written in Greek.
Yeah.
And the word is logos.
Logos.
And
exactly.
logos in ancient Greek does not mean just word. It literally means information, and you could dissect it and really translate it to mean the data from which all knowledge comes, right? And so here you've got this document, and it's a document I'm a sworn enemy to this document for 30 years. And here this document is saying the same thing I'm saying. And you look at all kinds of faith traditions, and fundamentally, I know that the Asian philosophies work a little bit differently than Western ones do, but I do see them also as faith traditions, kind of in the same vein. And what you just described is not dissimilar at all from what both quantum physics is saying and an information first, uh, ontological explanation says.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's confirmation bias. We're always looking for what confirms our opinion. Yeah. So I found that if you make a quantum vacuum, So you can make a space where there is nothing, nothing. So there's no particles at all, then particles appear. That's our level of understanding. It's like there should really, we're trying to create absolutely nothing, and as soon as we do, things appear in it. So it may be literally that there isn't a big bang, there's just a fizzle, yeah, that's
Well, I
constantly
call it a
going on.
cascade.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that fits in with the when we look at our reality, we see waves. We see everything, every movement, everything is spiraling. Our blood spirals through our veins and arteries. Our heart literally spirals. All our movements, our jets, everything's spiraling. So the wave, the spiral, one wave on top of another, that's a great way of seeing the universe. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like we want to believe that there was one start, because you're absolutely right. And I'm not saying there isn't, I just don't know, but it does fit in with there's one God, so there's one big bang, not there's a load of fizzles that just happened. And by the way, maybe there's a whole other dimension where all of this comes from, and it's beyond our like, and this is where I'm interested to see what you think. But our we are just in a way, not just, we are in a way also like terminals on this accessing information. I think it's Rupert Sheldrake, which makes a very good point. Probably not the first person, but memory doesn't necessarily, it's not been proven to be absolutely within the brain. Yeah, memory, especially if you've done remote viewing where you don't know something and suddenly at the end of the session you've done something, or you've been somewhere and collected information which you couldn't possibly know. We're sort of turning ourselves into, wow, so how much of my memory is recollecting information that's stored in my brain, and how much of is it me perhaps going psychically to a space where I collect information, and I've just trained myself to only collect the information that you know, that I want or whatever. And of course, that changes psychology, changes um, a lot about the way we see ourselves, I guess.
Well, one of the first people that I reached out to once, I mean, I knew I was writing a book, but I didn't know how serious I was about writing it. But I had a framework, I had whatever, about a 10-point examination of different aspects of reality. And I said, you know what, this is a lot like? This is a lot like morphic resonance. Certain aspects of it. I'm like, and I'm pretty familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's work. So I emailed him and I said, hey, I've got this framework. Would you be willing to take a look at it? And one of his assistants emailed me back, we'll pass this along, and good luck with everything. We don't know if you'll hear from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, well, that's a little bit exciting. And like 15, 20 minutes later, I got an email from Rupert Sheldrake. And I told my wife, I'm like, there's an email here from Rupert Sheldrake. And she goes, who's Rupert Sheldrake?
Yeah.
And, but, he said, yeah, send it over. And I want to look at it. And I sent it to him, and he got, I think it was that day, he got back to me and he said, this is harmonious with what I'm saying as it pertains to morphic fields in biology. And then we kind of had some discussions about a lot of professional scientists don't like some of my word choices, which
Mm.
is completely normal. It's part of their training, is you have to be careful what kind of words you use. But
Right.
I'm not a I'm not a scientist. I can use whatever words I want. But I often think if he hadn't gotten back to me, or him and Hal Puthoff were probably the two guys who maybe had the biggest impact on whether I thought I was onto something, because I'd sent synopsises to both of them, and
Mm.
they both came back and said, "Yep." In fact, Hal Puthoff said, "This is." It was something to the effect of, "This is very much in line with how I've been thinking about it." And I was like, "Well, I would consider these to be maybe two of the biggest thinkers on the planet as it pertains to these questions. And here they just told me that I might be onto something. So, but I think what you're saying about, like, here's how my framework sees it. You know, physics aside, and theoretical beginning of creation aside, the underlying substrate of reality that is informational, it doesn't actually exist. So, like, if somebody says, "Is it another dimension?" I would say that's a way to look at it. Almost everything that we call everything is a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
It's not at all on. It's how we communicate. It's how we understand things by
Mm.
metaphor. So I'm not saying that to call it a dimension is wrong. I just don't necessarily know that I picked that word only because of kind of some of the baggage that comes with it, interdimensional and so on. I
Mm.
really see the informational substrate as not existing at all in the sense that we think of things existing, right? It's not there, but it underlies what is there, right? Almost like if you were to, if I were to take these two items and hold them a distance from each other, the distance between them kind of exists and doesn't.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Mm.
Like the distance between them is not a thing, but it is real, right? And I look at the informational substrate like that. But what I see is it has a bias toward coherent, persistent structure. So the planet, is drawn to the star, that created it. And that's gravity related to mass, right? Well, that in itself is a metaphor. And it's one that we can accept scientifically because it allows us to make predictions that are accurate enough to be useful.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
but through my framework, it is not in fact the mass that is the reason that the stellar bodies are drawn to other larger stellar bodies. It's the informational coherence. And if you look at other aspects of existence, and science kind of, they slap us on the hand with a ruler when we try to draw parallels like this, but it's true. Uh, Religions draw adherents primarily hinging on their informational makeup, and societies draw citizens. Civilizations draw people in what could be argued to be a very similar force to physical gravity as it pertains to larger things. And same thing, if you walk by a painting and you're like, "Ooh, I like that." It's the informational coherence of that painting that is catching your attention and drawing you in. So I actually consider, they talk about the five. It was four for a while. Now it's five fundamental forces of nature or of physics. I don't think they are. I mean, yes, as you measure them, they could be considered separate forces, but what they really are is expressions of what it seems to me only one force exists, and that is the bias of the informational substrate towards coherent structures that persist against uh, the backdrop or the default state, which is entropic, not dissimilar from what you were talking about in certain ancient Chinese ways of thinking.
Yeah.
That balance.
That has a diamond shape, by the way. That's an interesting. So you have the zero at the top, you have plus and minus on the side, and then everything returns to zero. So you could say it as a triangle or a diamond. And in the center, you have when opposites meet, essentially there's a new kind of zero that appears. It's plus one minus one, which we can call zero, or we can say but it is actually plus one and minus one, which brings us back to this idea of you're constantly in a state of plus one minus one, constantly. So there's almost like a natural vibration. But what I wrote in my book, so it's interesting because I didn't know this was going to go this way. But I wrote, if you take the concept of energy, chi, and you write it down, everything so it flows, it follows a field, yeah. It has positive cycles, negative cycles, destructive cycles, controlling, so all of these things, which sort of are kind of keeping it in place. And then you replace the word energy with information. It's exactly the same. It works exactly the same. So if I go, okay, well, perhaps it's easier to talk about this to a Western person instead of talking energy, just talk information. I said to somebody, I guarantee one piece of information can change your life. Yeah. And um, I mean, it's joking. Yeah. But I say, okay, I say, you've won the lottery. Yeah. Now, you go, oh, wow, that, okay, not everybody's life, but you can reverse it if they've got a lot of money. You just say, yeah, you've lost everything. Yeah.
Right.
So um, to a certain extent, our whole system is based around information, and that's very much in line with what's the guy, um, the guy that did epigenetics, Bruce, what's his name? God,
Oh, no, I know.
you
I
know what I'm
know.
talking about. He's saying that
I actually know him. Grayson. Is that
um,
who you mean? Bruce Grayson?
no, the guy that originally brought up epigenetics, he was working in a lab, and he was trying to make um, stem cells become a certain kind of cell, and he messed up. The story is he messed up the environment. And so instead of these stem cells becoming nerve cells that he wanted to experiment on, he'd made a very small change in the environment and they became, I don't know, bone cells. I'm just making this up right now.
Right.
And he said, well, so basically, our cells are responding to the environment. And the DNA is not this blueprint. It's it's kind of like a library that we go to and say, okay, depending on the environment, we're going to respond in this way. So it changes, yeah, it changes the um, orientation of the whole thing. But
Hmm.
again, this orientation, so going back to the Taoist idea, we have this zero inside us, and they call this the internal, no, I don't know, say pill of immortality, maybe you could say that. Um, and then we have an external one as well. So we're all connected. So it's all the same, but you tell somebody that they're the same, no, everyone's going to say I'm different. So that's Monty Python joke. Um,
Well,
but
it's kind of like
yeah,
what you said before, where things are true and not true at the same time. It's just like gravity and space time. They are true at a certain level, metaphorically, they are true, right? Yes, the bigger thing will draw the smaller thing, and you can attribute that to mass. It's just not the complete truth. Right? The complete truth is, that the mass has to do with this other thing. In fact, so that's kind of what you're saying is kind of similar to that. Yes, you are different, but you're you're also the same as everything else.
right. And we have this fundamental spiraling, which goes on with the spiral is essentially from a 3D point of view, it's a diamond, yeah. So if
Mhm.
something's spiraling, you just got a load of diamonds all connected, and that brings us to a network of spiraling information, energy, whatever you want to call it. In fact, it's not whatever you want to call it. We do want to try and understand it because, well, the better we can predict how this behaves and how we can access it, it's going to change how we feel. And I think related to AI, um, which is, I say, it's not that smart. AI is a bit dumb. Yeah. So I think
It depends what you want out of it, I guess. But
what right.
I believe me, I get what you mean. I spent all afternoon just swearing at the computer screen, just trying to
it's
get something done.
it's it's giving us patterns back. We're asking for patterns, and it's saying, yeah, let me give you a pattern. And how does this pattern? Because the pattern of words, so words don't exist. Obviously, language doesn't exist. Yeah, it's purely a human creation. Yeah, so they don't exist objectively outside of us. So neither does the Earth or the universal gravity or anything else. Yeah, so kind of kind of fun. We play these games.
Informational structures.
Yeah, right.
We needed a metaphor to better create metaphors with.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I've almost got see, I've got two things going on in my head at the same time. What's interesting is Daryl Bem's work on feeling the future. So he's literally going. I don't know if you know that one. So he's actually going with university students who are the subject of many psychological experiments, and he's straight-laced psychology professor, and he said, let's take a an experiment that is totally accepted by the scientific community, and let's make some adjustments to it. So um, he has people memorize 10 standard words that are just like odd words from, a million different languages. And he tests them. And he's got 1,000 people, and 500 he tests them where they get to see the words and they get tested and they see how many they can remember after 5 minutes. Yeah. And then he got the other 500 is he tests them. He gives them the minutes to read the word and memorize them. He tests them and then he lets them see the words again. And because they've seen them in the future, statistically, which should not be possible, statistically, they get a better result.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And a number of
I think I
experiments
referenced
like
that
that.
study in my book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a great example. It's a great example
Beautiful.
of how time is. Well, we just don't understand. I mean, we don't understand time really. Um, you know,
It's
you
a
know,
metaphor.
well, you've sat there, haven't you? You've sat there and you thought this is an hour, and you've got up and it's been 5 minutes. Yeah, and you sat there
Yeah.
for 5 minutes, and an hour's gone by. We've all done that. So it's uh, it's a way that we're processing you. I mean, I think if I'm correct, I put it in yours and say it's the way we're processing information and the way we're
It's
structuring
the
information.
technically the way that we treat it. Time is a measure of physical distance, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, what is an hour? It's got to do with the physical distance traveled, your longitudinal position, the Earth itself. Um, our time is mostly it's a solar, uh, you know, heliocentric record keeping system. But
Mhm.
time, if you really break it down in my framework, it's the rendering order of reality. It's not it doesn't have a particularly special place in information first. It's just and it, the way that we treat it is not dissimilar from the way we understand most things. It's a metaphor for itself. Um, but I don't think it quite works the way that we think it does. With regard to uh, like that study that you referenced. I don't know. Are you familiar with Dean Radin's work at all?
A little bit. Yeah. I think I've a
Similar.
lot of things around it for sure.
Yeah, similar. So Dean has actually been also super helpful to me while I've been writing this book. Now, mostly because he's a very kind person and he's willing to take 15 minutes and explain to me how I'm wrong. But
Mm.
I need that. I'm not a
Yeah, absolutely.
experimental, psychologist. So, but he's done, most recently. Matter of fact, he just wrote a book called "The Science of Magic,"
Mm,
And I'm about halfway through it, because if you're writing a book, you end up reading a lot less. But it came out, I don't know, maybe a month ago, but just fascinating. But he's lately been doing a lot of studies with optical interferometers, proton scale interferometers, and you know, for 15 minutes, try to bend this beam of light. Okay, now for 15 minutes, sit in the same spot, do the same thing, but don't think about it.
mm,
And I mean, just really fascinating stuff. But the kind of retrocausal stuff that you were referencing there a minute ago is my brain does not really want to handle problems like that.
mm,
So I really have to spend a lot of time. Like I told you earlier about Social RV, the
mm.
website where they're
Yeah.
gathering a lot of data. And last night I had a conversation with one of the founders of that, and I was examining their protocols for how targets are selected, and the way they do it all on the blockchain, so every session is verified. It really would not be possible for anybody to um, get up to any tricks trying to
Mm,
make it look like something that it's not. But
mm,
you know, their system does not select a target until you submit your results for the session. So literally, there was no target
mm,
until you did the session. You scan you do it on paper. I do it on paper anyway. Scan your results in, upload them.
mm.
Then a target is selected by AI using blockchain. And I said, I sent him an email. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. You guys could be fouling with the results. That's a completely different dynamic than if the target is actually pre-selected. And it was actually starting to make some sense to me, because I had done a few sessions on that system where I wasn't really on the target, but that session ended up being really close to a later target.
Mm,
Right, so I'm describing whatever, a waterfall, right? Or what
mm,
I think is probably a waterfall.
mm,
And this
mm,
time it's not a waterfall, it's a ski slope. Okay.
mm,
But
mm,
then the next one that I do a couple days later is a waterfall. I'm like,
mm,
holy
mm,
smokes.
mm,
I
mm,
s- and he actually shared some data with me. The results are actually better when the target is not so the results tend to be better when the target is not selected until the moment that you upload your session. And
yeah.
the way that they do the way that AI reviews that is they actually pick, I think it's 9 other non-targets that they select at the same time they select the target. And then the way that it evaluates you, not dissimilar from how they did it at in the Army program.
Mm,
It rates your session against all 10 and makes the
mm,
determination of what the score is based on how well your session correlated to the actual target. But it was just fascinating to me, because I told him, after he told me that, I said, well, maybe growing up watching Back to the Future,
mm,
my reverence for the space-time continuum is more than it should be, because just innately it's still red flags go up and alarms go off. I'm like, wait a minute, if you tie this to a retrocausal um, if you tie it to retrocausal um, function, that must interfere.
mm.
It doesn't. In fact, it gives you a clearer result.
The Darrell experiment that I was mentioning, he did something similar. It became kind of famous because he had these university students looking at standardized pictures and checking their excitement. And these standardized pictures, um, essentially, the experiment is you show somebody a picture and you view their response. Yeah, so it's a standard experiment. But he was getting he put in some saucy pictures, not very saucy, but somebody in a bikini, attractive lady in a bikini, or a guy, with his six pack and sweat dripping off his, chest or whatever. Um, and he noticed that before the computer had selected the picture, the saucy ones were getting responses from, again, um, outside the statistical norm. If it's
Mhm.
random, yeah, it's just not possible. And again, your feel well, his study was called Feeling the Future, but it goes along the lines of what you're saying, and it takes me towards ARV, where I can say, okay, Ryan, I've got a target for you, and I've decided that the target you're going to see is going to depend on whether the stock market goes up or the stock market goes down or the stock market stays the same. And then you actually telling me something about the future. So you're telling me something about the stock market, but you don't know. And it doesn't matter, yeah, to you, because you're going to see the target that you see. And I hope I've explained that to everybody, watching and listening in a simple enough way. But the fact that our future, we are more connected to it than we think we are. Yeah, it's influencing, it has an influence on us without us even knowing it.
When I was learning remote viewing, and I learned from Lori Williams, and she's one of the people that I learned from, and she was a student or is a student of Lynn Buchanan,
Yes.
and she did a whole series of like lectures on time loops, right? And this has been a couple 3 years ago that I was taking these classes, and I remember putting my pen down during these sections. I'm like, this is too far out. Of course, you saw what happens to me with time. We were supposed to start this 7 o'clock tonight, but you're halfway around the world, so it's 7 in the morning for you on the
Mm-hmm.
9th, and it's 7 p.m. for me on the 8th. And so I have it written down right here in my book, 7 p.m. on the 9th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my brain just it doesn't want to reverse engineer the order of events, right? But she's talking about time loops and these different protocols for where if you're in the habit of identifying when you're in a situation where you would like it to go one way or the other, if you're just in the habit of identifying that later you will retrocausally address this situation. um,
Mm.
and I can't say that it makes sense to my brain. It doesn't. But you know, a lot of experiments indicate that this is the case. There's a book that's going to come out sometime in 2026, and it's written by these two scientists, Michael Wong. I think he's an astrobiologist, and Robert Hazen, who's actually a geologist. And these guys, a couple of years ago, wrote a paper um, called something like the law of increasing complexity, which talks about how, basically elements and, the makeup of things, suns, stars, galaxies, and so on, appears to get more complex all the time as the universe ages and unfolds. And I think, frankly, both of these guys should probably be getting looked at for Nobel Prize. But they got this book coming out next year called Time's Other Arrow, where it really gets into some of this stuff,
Mm.
at the level of fundamental physics. That the past, the present, and the future are not these three completely separate things, like like our material intuition wants them to be. And
It's
so,
interesting. If you go to the 0 point, that's where our intuition, when you drop all your expectations and so on, you go to that 0 point, you're able to access the past. You're able to, I think that's how clairvoyance access the future. It's the way that the Buddhists, they sit and the Buddhists, when they get a certain level, um, the idea is meridians open up and then they just can see the past. I had an uncle of mine, a kung fu uncle of mine, literally um, talking like a schizophrenic, you might say, talking to an entity because it was there for him, and he's just talking to it, getting some information, and then he just tells you information, and
Mhm.
you're going, "What just happened?" But it's because his relationship to, I would say, his relationship to energy or information, the information substrate is so fluid that he's just, oh, I just go there. It's like I just go there and I access that. It's not a problem. What about where do you see this your the practical applications of your theory? Because I struggled at Dow's DNA. I just used it. I just kind of talked to people, and then I would just I did sessions with people
Mhm.
where I kept on going back to zero. So I would just say, okay, so you're coming with a problem. Let me just go back to zero and start talking about it. And half the book is the sessions that came out of that. Um,
Mhm.
do you have a practical? I mean, I think we could talk for a long, long time. Yeah, and I want to send people to. Do you have anything that you're offering right now, or are you just writing the
Well,
book, or just want to get it out, get the ideas out there now?
all good questions,
I'm
and
sorry, it's a
yeah,
lot of
I
questions. Yeah,
no, that's okay. I have a plan. Um, so the book is like it's in editing now, right? So
very cool.
I'm in the home stretch on getting it done, and a lot of people maybe would normally wait until it's done and then start, doing stuff like this and social media and whatnot. But I'm a cart before the horse kind of guy. So, but you can go to the website for the book. It's called itfromus.com. And if you sign up for the mailing list, and I promise not to bother you, right? But if you sign up for the mailing list, you will get a discount offer when the book comes out. And my guess would be we're looking at something like March. But 3 weeks ago I was saying February, so uh, we shall
Yeah,
see. But first
yeah.
first part of next year. But the practical applications, um, that's something that I've really been spending some time on lately because when I was writing the book initially, I was I was fascinated myself. I can't believe that this has happened. Right? I read all these books for 30 years and watched these lectures and listened to these podcasts, and I've been doing this waiting for somebody else to figure it out,
Mhm.
or come up with a better metaphor at the end of the day. And it never once did it occur to me that that might happen in any way through me. Um, and I mean, and I don't think I'm special. I'm really not that special. But I have this certain kind of brain, and it's one that just can't relax if the question hasn't been answered. So for whatever, most of my life, I've kind of just been, walking around completely unsatisfied when I look around. It's like, what is this? And I go to people who are supposed to have answers for what this is, and their answers are worse than not knowing in many cases. So, no, nothing against people dedicate their lives to things, but string theory is for the birds, man. There is no dark matter. There is no dark energy. Those things assume that the universe had an instant beginning, and the speed of light is constant and gravity works the same everywhere. I mean, in an information first framework, none of those things can be taken for granted. But back to your question, which is what are the practical applications? A UAP, right?
That's a
Uh,
UFO in my generation.
yeah,
Yeah,
UFO.
yeah,
Mine too. It shoots through the air, right?
yeah.
At 30, 40, 50,000 miles an hour. Uh yeah, no. If if anything shot through the air at 50,000 miles an hour, everything would be completely atomized, destroyed, obliterated. The thing would be obliterated. The air would be obliterated. Probably the amount of energy generated, but just from the friction, would blind anybody looking at it. To do what they say the so-called tic tac did, which
Mm.
is go from 60,000 feet above sea level to sea level in a fraction of a second. The amount of energy required to make that happen could run the state that I live in for an entire year.
Mm.
It's those are not physical objects as we understand them, traversing space time as we understand it.
Mm.
My framework sees those as informational devices. They are reality rewriters or reality rule editors, and they are in fact manipulating reality around them, and that's how they do what we see them do. And I mean, we could do 6 other podcasts just on UAPs
Mm.
and
Mm.
how it ties in with consciousness and all that stuff. I mean, it's pretty crazy. But remember what I said kind of towards the beginning of our discussion. Gravity is not fundamentally related to mass. And we see evidence of this in UAPs. Well, if gravity is not related to mass and reality can be manipulated in such a way that UAPs can do what we see them do, then that means we don't need trucks. So whether they're practical applications, depending on your definition of the word practical,
Mm.
I see information first as potentially, I'm open to being wrong, completely open to being wrong, but I see it potentially as a line of inquiry that our entire civilization could pivot on, and potentially start working our way out of some of the real serious problems that we've got as a species.
Interesting.
If we keep burning everything in sight to heat homes and get from point A to point B, and I mean, how many more generations do you think can stand a doubling of the population every 2 to 3 generations, and natural resources being consumed at 3 and 4 and 5 times the rate every 2 to 3 generations? I mean, we're we're in trouble. We're in trouble, and not just that physical stuff, but we also have a real problem with meaning. Religions are dropping like flies, because the metaphors don't work that well anymore. Um, you know, in where I come from, uh, United States, maybe it might be a little more so here than in some other Western countries, but you go to a middle school in pick a town. You go to a middle school and they just sat through science class
Mm.
where it was explained to them, how how a solar system came into existence. And if you went and asked each of those kids, how did how did the how did the world begin? 7 out of 10 of those kids are going to tell you God did it in 6 days, right? They're just holding on militantly to these explanations and the reason they hold on so militantly is because the explanations don't work, right? we need a way for science and religion to understand that, in fact, they're not enemies at all. Um, they're two sides of the same coin. They're two dialects of the same language. They're trying to answer the question, uh, yes, how, but more importantly, why. And if my framework is accurate, then it's the top of the pyramid. It's the place where faith and reason uh, share something, right? Why? Well, some people, we talked about the different faith traditions that basically say the same thing physics says. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. One is using a certain type of metaphor to understand what our purpose is, and the other is using another kind of metaphor to understand purpose in a sense. But religion doesn't really address reason, and science doesn't really address faith or meaning. And so I see information first as a way for these two things to come back together. Because, 5, 10,000 years ago, scientist and priest was the same job. The shaman was both. And I think they needed to go their separate ways. I think that needed to happen for us to get where we are. But we're to the point now where we can say, okay, fine. If we can just agree on a few key things, we can start letting go of the dogma and everybody rowing in the same direction, because we're up against it. I don't think we have. And I'm not saying whatever, if we don't have our act together by the year after next, we're all going to die. I'm not saying that, but I think we're to the point in our civilization where if we don't come to understand something deeper, than we have, I think we're going to run out of time.
Mate, I think it's fantastic what you've done in terms of putting down a framework, putting it into a book. I'm looking forward to seeing that. The website where people can register for that is
It's itfromus.com. And if you go there, itfromus.com. If you go there, it'll point you to every, what, if you're a Substack person, I write articles on Substack, Medium, and all those places. But also, I have a really fun article. I think you might be interested in reading this. It's in the International Remote Viewing Association puts out a quarterly publication called Aperture, and I was invited to write an article for that. It'll be in the issue. It's getting ready to come out. Their fall 2025 issue, but it's about how remote viewing works within an information first framework. And the thing that was maybe the most fun to write about in there was evaluating why remote viewing the future is oftentimes less accurate and more problematic than remote viewing, the past or the present or whatever. And you touched on that a little bit. And I actually, through an information first framework, I evaluate that as, you probably know about some of the studies that have been done, whereas, remote viewers were seeing 9/11 years in advance, according to some reports, and they weren't sure why. They're supposed to be remote viewing Dodger Stadium, and it's whatever 1997, and they're seeing this chaos and explosions and whatnot, and it doesn't make any sense at the time. Well, the reason that they're seeing that is because it's an emotional anchor, because that event is going to go on to affect so many lives, so many conscious beings will be affected by that. And like if you and I tried to remote view the lottery tomorrow, we would generally not do all that well at it, right? And I propose that the reason for that is because that is a completely random event by design. It doesn't have roots going back in time, right? Whereas 9/11 does. 9/11's roots go back, in some cases decades, right? And so there are things that make a future outcome more likely. So anyway, I've got that article
Hmm.
coming out pretty soon.
Okay.
I'm kind of excited to hear what people have to say about it.
I think we could talk for ages. I have to go, so I gonna um I love hearing your ideas. I like the well, obviously, I've just I just published my sixth book, so I totally feel you the process. I want to say to you, like, you can publish a second edition. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah. I mean, that's what I tell myself because I feel like sometimes you're just really holding back. So I really recommend everybody to go and have a look at your website and register and so on. And I love the fact that you're out there putting these ideas because the ideas sometimes they really do come before the science and the quantum physicists go and show us what's possible. So it's really greatly
Oh,
appreciated.
math can show you how it works, but I don't think math can tell you what it is.
Fantastic, Ryan. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Richard. I appreciate you having me on. Loved it.